We wanted to talk about some of the common myths we've heard about heat pump water heaters and then cover the actual facts. First myth is that a lot of folks seem to think that heat pump water heaters are always going to be too big for their home.
It is true that traditional heat pump water heaters are slightly taller than a standard electric water heater. The footprint is comparable though. They'll still take up about the same amount of floor space. They're just taller. The reason that they're taller is because you've essentially stuck that window unit, the compressor, on top of the tank. There is the ability for some of these systems to be split, like you would see in a heat pump where there's an outside unit and an inside unit. There's one manufacturer that makes something like that. And in those cases, you could just have a standard size storage tank inside because the compressor sits outside. In that case, you'd have more flexibility into the size of that storage tank. Also, to take into account with the more standard heat pump water heaters, when you have the compressor on top, those have filters in them. A lot of the time, the filter pulls straight up, so you need to allow for room to pull up that filter. Manufacturers will also provide dimensions to ensure that you have enough space around the water heater, so that's something else to look at as well. In terms of the weight of these are significantly heavier. Pulling up a random 50-gallon hot water heater, that's a heat pump one, that weighed in at 218 pounds, whereas the standard electric 50-gallon weighed in at 132 pounds.
So, taller and heavier, but otherwise very similar.
Yep.
So another thing we hear is that they make noise, that they're louder than a conventional electric water heater.
They are indeed louder because they do have that compressor that is sitting on top unless you happen to have gotten one of the split systems. So there is noise from that. It tends to be no louder than a refrigerator. Similarly to a refrigerator, it cycles on and off as needed to maintain the temperature in the storage tank. Manufacturers have definitely spent a lot of time and effort trying to minimize the sound transmission from these. That said, it is something where you probably don't want to put it very close to a cluster of bedrooms. A lot of the time, the best locations for these are a basement or a garage or a similar space that's separated from the living area.
That sounds manageable. I never think about my refrigerator's noise.
No,
that's for
most
sure.
people don't.
Gotcha. Okay. So what about cost? People are asking how much these things cost, and maybe they're just way too expensive.
They are significantly more expensive than a standard electric water heater. But with the incentives that are available, which we'll talk about, and the savings that are recognized each year, they actually end up having a pretty quick payback time. The numbers on this table, they are for some example 50-gallon water heaters that anyone could pick up at a big box store today. And the annual operating costs are from the energy guide labels on those respective water heaters. So the heat pump water heater, with those savings, which are annual savings, would pay for itself with those savings in just over 3 years. With the utility rebates in the range of $300 to $400, coupled with the tax credits that are available for up to about 30% of the product through the IRA, that equipment pays for itself in even less time. As an added benefit, if you have a client that's interested in achieving net zero, meaning they're going to be putting PV panels on their home, if you're able to reduce the electricity cost, you have savings in how much PV you'd need to install to achieve net zero.
They do use a lot less energy, don't
Yes.
they? All right, so one last little detail. This word hybrid, we got used to hybrid as we were talking about hybrid vehicles years ago. Does that mean that these use gas some of the time?
Nope, it is just a marketing term and probably did draw on the success of using the word hybrid for hybrid vehicles. They are all electric. They're called hybrid because they can be all electric, they could be all heat pump, or they can be a hybrid of both, which is their optimal operating mode.
And the electric is, heat pump is still electric.
Yes.
You're talking about the electric resistance heat as
Yep.
the old school heat strips.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right, there's one more though. We talked about bringing cold air in. Are they difficult to install compared to a conventional electric tank?
There's a little bit more involved with their installation, but if you have the skills to install a standard electric water heater, you have the skills for a typical heat pump water heater as well. The main difference is running the condensate line. So just like your window AC drips out water, these also have water as a waste product, and so that condensate needs to be drained to somewhere. So a condensate line will need to be installed. They can be installed with ducting. They don't have to be installed with ducting. And what that ducting does is it either expels the cold air to a specific space that you choose, or you can pull in the outside air, the heat, from a specific space that you choose. So it allows you a little bit more flexibility with how the water heater is installed. So usually if somebody is used to doing plumbing work, they're used to doing HVAC work, it's the same materials, same installation specifics, just applied to a different piece of equipment.
Gotcha. And the ducting is optional. It really depends on the home and the client's goals.
Exactly. You'll always want to refer to the manufacturer's installation instructions just to make sure that where you plan to put it, it can work without ducting. In some cases it will be required, but there will be many spots where it's optional.
Okay.